Welcome to Chapter 6, Newspapers and the News, Reflections of a Democratic Society. The first newspapers were published in Europe in the 17th century. Numerous papers were published in the American colonies, but they faced extensive censorship from the British government. Newspapers printed before the 19th century tended to be partisan publications that were supported through high subscription fees and political subsidies. This changed with the rise of the penny press in the 1830s. The penny press were mass-produced on steam-powered printing presses and contained news of interest to ordinary people. The papers cost 1 or 2 cents and were supported by advertisers who wanted to reach the paper's large numbers of readers. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were characterized by the yellow journalism of the New York newspapers published by Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst. The two publishers tried to attract circulation and attention by running comic strips, advice columns, and sensational stories about sex, crime, and scandal. This was also the time when newspapers started running extensive headlines and illustrations. The major classes of newspapers today include the following: newspapers with a national reach that may cover a particular urban area, but also try to print material of interest to the entire country, such as USA Today, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and the Washington Post. Newspapers of this size may just try to reach their own urban area. Community papers that serve a particular town, suburb, or group and provide news that readers cannot get elsewhere, and alternative newspapers that serve specialized populations rather than a broad general audience. These can serve ethnic populations within a community, groups such as gays and lesbians, or even people who are not interested in traditional newspapers. Evolving technology has brought changes to the newspaper business. The rise of television news resulted in a decline in the number of afternoon newspapers, and changes in the news consumption patterns have drawn audiences and advertisers away from both newspapers and broadcast television news. Digital media have given newspapers new opportunities to update the news rapidly and fresh ways to deliver the news. Whatever the method of delivery, reporters struggle with the issue of objectivity, especially when the story is close to home and when they are risking their lives to report the news. Many people claim that the media are biased toward one political view or another. Conservative critics argue that there is a liberal bias arising from the tendency of reporters to be more liberal than the public at large. The liberals' counterargument is that the press has a conservative bias because most media outlets are owned by parent corporations that hold pro-business views. Finally, some critics argue that the media hold a combination of values that straddle the boundary between slightly left and slightly right of the center. The press in the United States began as partisan during the colonial period, but adopted a detached, factual, objective style in the 1830s to appeal to a broader audience. After studying this chapter, you will be able to discuss the development of the colonial and early American press, explain tabloid newspapers, how they differ from broadcast newspapers, describe the 3 major types of newspapers today with examples. Number 4, name 6 basic news values used by journalists, and discuss the risks that reporters take to cover the news. And finally, explain how the internet and mobile technology have changed the news and newspaper business. This concludes the introduction.